Good afternoon, all, and I hope people in the back can hear me. Clear? Good? Perfect. Thank you. I think it's at conferences the best time to come right after lunchtime because everyone's kind of in that snooze siesta mode, and then you can really sort of hit them with deep content, data-heavy slides, and that sort of, closes the deal. But I will try to keep it interesting as much as possible, and we will try to keep a data slide to maybe maximum of one, even though we want to maybe simplify to amplify and sort of live that theme as we present today. So thanks again for your time. Thanks to Dario and the team for giving us the platform. I'm part of Putnam Associates, part of Initio Advisory, and we are here to talk about the concept of simplify to amplify, which is talking about sort of shifts in the customer engagement landscape and the work we have done through our surveys, our research, and the data that we have looked at in terms of product launch performance across a wide range of assets to be able to come up with an analysis of what's going on in the customer engagement space and where organizations need to start stepping up, especially as we start getting into a complex conversation, right? I'm going to talk about three key things today. As I said, there are certain macro shifts happening as we speak today, and I want to sort of articulate what those are and break those down for you. And I really want to thank Danilo because his concepts really lead into a lot of the points that I'm going to be making this afternoon. The second thing I want to talk about is barriers to successful go-to-market, especially when it comes to launch performance of newly launched products, novel therapeutics, and really looking at sort of what we at Putnam have come up with in terms of a three-step framework in order to be able to plug those gaps and enable your frontline salespeople as well as your commercial organization to perform effective go-to-market activities. So without further ado, there are fundamental shifts happening as we speak today. There's a global consolidation of healthcare delivery through integrated delivery networks, integrated care systems. And what this does is it has a knock-on effect on things such as disease awareness, the administrative burden on physicians, as well as access to information and being able to activate that information to be able to ensure a successful go-to-market, right? The second is with the onset of novel therapeutics and a competitive landscape. I mean, we've talked about, let's talk about oncology. I mean, the infusion of capital into CAR-Ts, followed by ADCs, and now we're talking about bispecifics. What it's leading to is a hyper-competitive market landscape where value differentiation is getting narrower by the day, and companies have lower margin for error when it comes to sort of the messaging and the value proposition that they're bringing to the table, independent of the complexity of the novel or the novelty of the therapeutics that they're bringing to market. This then has impact in terms of where they choose to allocate their resources and where they are going with in terms of their headcount plans and the sort of articulation of the operating model between a global, regional, and a local structure. Now, the third piece is, and I think this is something everyone in this room is familiar with, is evolving legislations. There's the impact of the Inflation Reduction Act. There are things around improvements in HTA regulations and joint assessment exercises in the EU, which have a downward pressure on cost and need pharma companies to step up in terms of how they're constructing their value propositions, how they're constructing their value case models as they articulate the value of their products. And lastly, this is a theme we have heard all about today: AI, digital, technology, EMR, data, third-party data, commercial data, clinical data, medical data. I don't think I need to overemphasize the importance here, but with this access to technology also comes the challenge, as Marco Andre in the early session today talked about. The technology moves really fast, but pharma companies are like, big battleships. They cannot keep up with the pace of change. So how can you sort of plug the gaps? And the second point Marco made was around the possibility of, or the thinking process where it's AI is coming for our jobs. It's not. But what does that mean? How can you harness AI, data, and technology in a way that articulates the value proposition of your products, of your go-to-market strategy. Ultimately, what this ends up being is a huge demand and a expectation that's implicitly placed on your frontline sales force, on your frontline MSLs, on your CAMs, and the role that they need to start playing by using all of these macro factors in guiding better improved decision-making with their key customers. So our team put together an analysis, and I promise you this is the only data-heavy slide, so please stay with me on this. So we've looked at 3 archetypes, and these archetypes are defined based on the competitiveness in the markets. It's based on established versus differentiated care pathways, as well as we look at sort of the value proposition that different therapeutics bring to the market. And fundamentally, you have a value optimizer where it's sort of expanding on an established care pathway. You have a value architect where you're coming into an established care pathway, but with highly differentiated IP. And a value engineer where it's sort of more of that blue sky, creating a market where none exists, right? Now, independent of which archetype you fall into, what we found is collectively, fewer than half of all product launches in the time surveyed, which is 4 years between 18 to 22, underperformed their launch expectations. Now, if you look at something like a value optimizer, that ratio is actually 2 out of 3 products underperform their launch expectations. You look at something like a value engineer where you do have a differentiation in terms of your value proposition or a complex care pathway that you're traversing. And even there, you find that it's only 1 in 4 that are exceeding expectations. Now, you may be asking a question, why is that? And what does this mean in terms of your standard operating model and go-to-market strategies? What this means is there are 3 fundamental misunderstandings that are baked into go-to-market plans today. Number 1 is a complete disassociation from where customers are with their thinking, their needs, their wants, and their articulation of what value means for them. Number 2 is as a consequence of that misalignment, there is misaligned investment plans. There's misalignment in terms of headcount, in terms of technology investments, data purchases, and associated investment plans made at a global, regional, and local levels. And lastly, because of these 2 things, there is then a fundamental gap in cross-alignment across functions and across teams and capabilities in go-to-market organizations. Now, this chart is meant to elaborate on what that means in terms of that difference, right? The orange colors here indicate what is valuable for customers, and the blue colors here indicate what is valuable for pharma companies. And this comes from proprietary survey work that we've done with some of our client partners. So number 1 I want to point out is, if the laser is working, disease awareness and characterization, right? So where your customers are with novel therapeutics, there is sort of a interdisciplinary HCP team that's providing that care pathway for patients. And what they need is the product teams and the frontline teams to be able to keep up with them in terms of understanding the disease burden, improve patient pathways for treatments, as well as the cross-linking of different types of therapeutic areas and indication strategy in order to be able to give them the right information at the right time. But what pharma companies are ending up doing is they are deprioritizing this because for them, it's a high burden, it's a high cost, it's a high commitment, and they're not valuing that difference enough, right? The second thing is diagnostics. A lot of ask from customers is around preemptive diagnostics, around additional treatments or novel biomarker-based diagnostic treatment approaches that allow preventative care over care at a later stage of a disease area. Now, again, when we're talking about a go-to-market commercial organization, this is something where the traditional profile of a member has not necessarily meant that they have needed to know everything in this case, especially across complex therapies across multiple domains, right? At the same time, what you might see is here, in terms of a treatment or evidence of treatment working, pharma companies spend a lot of time generating new evidence, robust evidence, providing that evidence to customers. But customers are not valuing at the same level as a pharma company. And this is where I think we need to think about in terms of the gap between where customers are, where pharma companies are, and what this means in terms of launch performance, which is ultimately where the rubber hits the road. So what we at Putnam have come up with is a 3-step framework in order to emphasize how you can bridge this gap. We understand that there are multiple factors, but foundationally there are 3 key principles here. The first principle is focusing on ecosystem IQ, as we call it, which is talking about awareness of the different stakeholders, awareness of what's in it for them and not for the pharma company. So you're partnering with them rather than speaking at them. The second is reindexing investment priorities on customer jobs to be done versus what we think should be done. And the third is evolving frontline capabilities and creating new mix of teams with different skills and complementary abilities to be able to meet customers where they are. I'm going to do a deep dive into this before we break for questions. Number 1. So what does ecosystem IQ mean? Ecosystem IQ has 2 components. It means that you fundamentally understand who are your stakeholders, what their needs and wants are, and how are you able to operate effectively with them in a complex therapy or disease landscape. And you're able to do this by understanding the ecosystem in which those stakeholders operate and the way that they choose to operate in a specific therapy, in a specific care domain. Right? Now, the second thing is aligning investment mix to customer needs. Right? Now, there are 3 parts here. Number 1 is a zero-based cost approach. Number 2 is decluttering low-value jobs. And number 3 is reprioritizing jobs to be done in the framework of what it means for customers. What do I mean by that? There are a lot of activities today as companies work on in terms of go-to-market where they are indexing on roles, jobs, value propositions, content, marketing activities that are not accretive to the launch process. Absolutely. And what they need to do is move away from that to be able to come up with a better understanding of the stakeholder needs and then articulate the value proposition where the stakeholder demands it. Second is decluttering the low-value jobs and reindexing towards high-value jobs. Now, these are both interconnected to the extent that there are role definitions that are starting to emerge in the market and a few different organizational models where people can be placed with the right kind of skills, training, positioning, and team mix to be able to execute launches effectively. The third thing I want to talk about is an augmented frontline. So we've talked about technology, the role of AI, the role of data, and various other factors today, all through the day today. And people have come at it from different angles of what works for them, their organizations, and their value propositions. But at the same time, what we have found at Putnam is that there are 4 key personas that are starting to emerge in high-performance, successful organizations. Number 1 is an ecosystem architect. So this is someone who is a systems thinker, provides that strategic landscape overview, and acts as the glue binding frontline teams together. Number 2 is a customer experience champion. I think this would be quite familiar to a lot of us. In customer experience champion is someone who is well integrated within the functions, the launch teams, the mindset, the technology decisions, the go-to-market capabilities as they are being built for customers and builds that customer empathy within the pharma organization. Number 3 is disease navigators. So disease navigators work on deep understanding of complex therapies, the complex patient pathways, the patient journeys, and are able to provide that input into the frontline teams. And the fourth is patient access enabler, who's working closely with patient access programs and working through the funding or the mechanisms that are required in order to make sure that the right products are reaching the right patient groups, working with the right channels. Now, all of this comes together in terms of frontline teams being augmented with integrated back office teams that are providing that support and are nimble enough to be able to reorient themselves when you go from, let's say, a complex oncology indication to a ultra-rare disease to a cell and gene therapy, right? In addition to that, it's fundamentally deploying these organizations, but not in a way that's static. What that means is that these are certain personas or archetypes of the skills, mindsets, attitudes, capabilities that exist within an organization, but it doesn't mean these are 4 people or 4 roles. This is an intermixed set of skill sets and abilities that you can bring to the table. I want to show this through 2 examples of companies we have worked with. One is where there was a new market development role created in order to execute on a specific launch plan. And the work done here was to create a disease awareness specialist role within the frontline team to be able to work with the Center of Excellence on improving diagnostics and leading special initiatives. A second model that we have worked with is a hub and spoke model, where you have specific in-market teams that are lean but cross-functional, which mixes with the MSLs and CAMs in specific major European countries, augmented with clustered teams where the go-to-market strategy involves working with a local cluster. So in summary, I want to re-emphasize the fact that in this audience, in this group, we're all here because we care about the customer engagement and we talk about customer experience. And in order to go from where we are today to where customers are across complex therapies in comprehensively competitive marketplaces with novel therapies and highly consolidated care pathways, the 3 steps to success is developing a high ecosystem IQ, realigning investments across pharma commercial organizations, and augmenting the frontline and empowering them at the right level with the right support capabilities. With that, I thank you for your time and appreciate your support. So I think we have about 2 minutes if there are any questions. Cool. Thank you for your time.